like to invite Reverend Ruth up to give us some of her ideas about what we can do with our attention rather than just looking at our phones.
Rather than looking at our phones.
Thank you, dear. I am going to use the platform. I'm always amazed that Allison can be up here without that platform.
Not by much.
Oh my, yes. What a world and what a state of the world. And that reading is really what it's about. So much is trying to call our attention out there as if that is what were real. That would be what is real. Where's the subjunctive in there? It is not real. I know it hurts, and I totally get that image that you had, and thank you so much for sharing that, Jim. Yeah, because you were tapping into many, many people's experience. The reality, though, the home is within. And we have to be at least open to the possibility of balancing, if not actually living from within. Balancing the within and the without. You know, enough of us, most of us have been on the planet long enough to watch this government do a lot of nasty things. And many of us have done a lot of work to counteract those nasty things. The fact that the BLM was limited is because of the work we did when we were young. The fact that it's been turned around may require us to step up and do more work. But that work has to come from within, not in reaction to what is without. And that's what I want to talk about when I talk about attention. What am I attending to? Attend, it's from the Latin. The first part, at, is the Latin word ad, toward. What am I tending toward? Am I tending toward all the things that people out there are going to make money or power or something, or my attention, my credits, my focus? Or am I tending toward a deeper truth and meaning? Am I tending toward loving the folks and the world in which I live and with whom I am constantly connected? Where is my attention? Now, I'm willing to bet, because there are enough creative, intelligent people in this room, that many of the people in this room could be, if they haven't been diagnosed with ADD.
Oh.
Yeah. Attention deficit disorder. All that means is we're not paying attention to what they want us to pay attention to. Truly. It means that a boy is not being given enough time running around and playing and working out his fantasies to be able to sit in a classroom for an hour and listen to what someone else is telling them. In most cases, that's who gets diagnosed with ADD. Or it means that you're so creative and you've got such a marvelous mind that when someone says something, you're spinning it out into something else entirely, and you have to be brought back to what that someone else is saying. There is no such thing as a deficit disorder with regard to attention. There is a discipline of learning to be mindful and aware of what is going on around us. And it's a discipline that we can learn. And in most other cultures, and in our very own culture up to about 60 years ago, it was normal to teach kids this. how to be mindful and be present when someone else is speaking. I see everyone in this room is being present now. Thank you very much. And I also know that as I go along, I'm going to say things that trigger a whole creative bunch of stuff. Yay! That's fabulous. And you can say, could you repeat that, please? Or you can come to the dialogue circle and say, I missed that part because I got to thinking about this. And that is perfectly okay. Where are we choosing to put our attention? There's, in the last 50 years, a concept that's emerged in our culture that's called mindfulness. It's just attention. Where is my attention? What am I tending toward? Am I tending toward what is really going on in me and around me? Or am I tending towards something that someone else out there wants me to be focused on? Now, when I put this topic together, I'm going to give away your secret. That's here, Sal.
Okay.
I put this topic together, and I always write 2 or 3 sentences, which Sally then puts in ChatGPT and creates these beautiful paragraphs that sometimes are about 1/3 of my talk. So do read the paragraph. It's a very useful paragraph. Because what has happened in our world as there has been more and more information is that people are getting money and power based on which block of information we are putting into our brains at a given point in time. It's kind of interesting. It's called the attention economy. Where we put our focus, whether it's in our cell phone or our computer or even on the radio or whatever, someone is making money or getting more power because we are putting our attention on it. Now, what's interesting is we know in studies in psychology and through the spiritual traditions for thousands of years that where I put my attention is what I become, as we read today. Where am I tending toward? My attention is what I am tending toward. When we begin our service, we honor the thousands of years of people who stewarded this land. So that when we arrived, it was hospitable. It was heaven on earth. People from other parts of the world came here and went, wow. You know, there are an increasing number of stories out there about POWs from Germany and Japan who are brought into the US and properly, according to the war conventions, being cared for, who thought they were in heaven because they were in Oregon. And when the Applegate Trail was functioning, the Oregon Trail was functioning, people would come and they go, is this the Garden of Eden? There were many nations of people who lived in this region before any of us Europeans arrived, and they tended toward a world of balance, of mutual support. Can we do that? There are also stories, many, many stories emerging now about what's likely to happen to the people who live here now if we don't tend toward a life of balance and mutual support with the planet and with each other and with our souls. Can we do that? Can we tend toward that? That is my number one message, that we must tend toward a life of balance and harmony, mutual support in our relationships with each other, and with the world, and with the all that is. There will be wars and rumors of war. When I listen to the Christian preachers on the radio, they are so convinced we are in the last days of this civilization. They're absolutely convinced. What I think they don't understand is that what they think is going to happen is already happening. I was listening to someone describing what was going to happen after the 1,000 years that Satan was bound, which is supposed to be 1,000 years after this period they think we're in now. And it was describing what is happening now. When we put our attention on what isn't working, we get more of it. We become what we put our attention on. We tend toward that. And I have as many heartfelt concerns as you all do, and as much anger as you all do about the ridiculous behavior of our current administration. And it gets triggered whenever I talk to my conservative relatives. Quote unquote. And then I realize that the people who are acting in that way honestly believe they are doing the best for themselves and the world. I don't like it. I don't follow their line of reasoning. I think their assumptions are badly based. My intellect can go all kinds of interesting places with it. But what am I tending toward? What are we tending toward? Now, some of you have heard me talk about my growing up, and many of you already are aware of it, but I still need to say it. My mother worked for the Defense Department her whole adult life. I knew growing up what our bombing capabilities were. I knew when B-52s came online. I knew where the silos were. I knew where a lot of the potential targets were around the world as I was growing up, just because it was the world that I was living in. But I had a balance. And that was the grandmother that many of you have heard about, who worked with Gandhi. Imagine this life. My mother honestly believed she was working for peace on the planet. She believed that if we were powerful, then the bad guys wouldn't do what they could do. My grandmother knew that when we are the love we wish to see in the world, we must see more of it. So my grandmother became the dean of a college, and thousands of young women were given that kind of experience, while my mother worked in a vault at the top floor of the Museum of Science and Industry and tried to prevent the worst from happening. My mother was a very miserable woman. My grandmother died peacefully and in love with life. My goodness. I love them both. They taught me so much, including where am I putting my attention? What am I tending toward? So I'm going to invite, when we have these emotional reactions, and I got to say this is not what I wrote for today. When we have these emotional reactions to what the media is telling us about what is going on in the world, to get us to pay more attention to them, they're trying to grab us and hold us. They're structured to do that. There's actually a book about how to do that. Okay, written by a psychologist, a Skinner psychologist. Those of you who studied B.F. Skinner, they're using his techniques on us, people. They do when they're developing what's on the apps, the programs that are now called apps, so you'll be less afraid of them. They're just computer programs, but we call them apps. They're applications, and that's a good thing. You can see I have some emotions around this. The media is trying to grab your attention and keep it there so that you will live in fear and upset and anxiety and go buy more. Literally, that's their job. Please do not give into it. Recognize that there is something going on out there that you do not appreciate or approve of. Do all you can to go inside to the place where you are, where we live, where our home is, and act from that place. Build community, build a garden, connect with someone, love someone, write a letter. Protests are effective, not nearly as effective as impeachments. Right? Any person in Congress, in the House of Representatives, can start an impeachment process. And if you start with the vice president, get rid of him, then when you get rid of the president, then your Speaker of your House becomes the president. Okay. Pay attention to what works if you feel called to do that work. But only from the inside, Hans. Please. Don't let that media grab you and pull you into their vortex. I can't believe I'm preaching to you. But at this time, it's so important. Now, we are not only experiencing all these astrological things, that there are huge shifts in human consciousness. Astrology just shows us what's going on. It's not making things happen. But we're also seeing some of the major activity on the sun, which means we are closer right now. I'm going to pay attention to something out there, and that is we're closer right now to a major solar electromagnetic field interruption than we have been in decades. I would invite you to consider the possibility that you may wake up one day in the very near future. Not just the possibility, the probability is increasing daily that all these electronics will not be working. And the electronics are now running your cars. And the electronics are now running our power grid. And the electronics are now running your stove, if you have a gas stove. Make sure you can light it with a match. Really. I'm inviting you to be aware that from the inside, if I can live in a mutually supportive world, not in a world governed by others' notions of what should be, then I'm going to be fine, even if all the electronics go out. About 30 years ago, I was teaching at a place in Northern Oregon called Living Enrichment Center. Some of you are familiar with this place. And I had a bunch of people come up to me and they said, "You're a futurist. Tell us about these horrible earth changes. They're going to be coming up in 93 and the whole world's going to fall apart. And you know, the continent of the US is going to have this big, huge ocean in the middle and California isn't going to be here anymore. Please help us." And I did, because what I understood, and this is really important, folks, what I understood is that when someone has an intuitive awareness, when someone has an insight that comes through channeling or whatever we call it, it doesn't come as words, it comes as an image. It comes as what we ultimately translate into a symbol. These were called the Earth Changes years. Remember the Earth Changes years? That's when this was happening. And I looked at them and I went, wow. I grew up and lived, at that time I had lived virtually my whole adult life on the San Andreas Fault. This thing that was supposed to fall apart and go away, right? Well, in 1972, on the San Andreas Fault, through 1995, on the San Andreas Fault, Silicon Valley emerged. The earth-shaking, world-shaking, transformative event called the personal computer, which we now hold in our hands. That was the earth-shaking event that was going to kill California and, make it separate from the rest of the country. Guess what? It did. But not only in the psychological sense, in the economic sense, was it separate, but the image came in as physical. Earthquakes and breaking off. About 10 years later, I was traveling back and forth across the country a lot. I had a daughter on the East Coast. I have one there again, a different daughter. And she was having babies, so I was going back and forth. And I drove a lot because sometimes there were things that needed to be carried that couldn't go in an airplane. And I ended up one time in the Mississippi Valley where the Missouri River comes to the Mississippi. You all know that area. Some of you do. It had been flooded in the 90s. Flooded like this deep for miles. And I realized that if I had seen a satellite picture of that region in the mid-90s, I would have said, oh my God, there's an ocean in the middle of the continent dividing the east side from the west side. And that was the image that earth-changing event was all about. A 10, 12-inch flood over the whole region. I'm telling you this because a lot of times what people tell us is going to happen, whether they're getting it from intuition or from that other world I work in, those computer model things. It's coming at us from a place that is not going to be our physical experience. It's a metaphor, it's a symbol, it's a message of possibility and potential that is actually going to happen at a different level. Okay? So a few moments ago I said, be prepared. There is a very strong probability that all our electronics are going to shut down in the next 6 months. Strong probability. I mean, we're looking at 80-20 right now. But I'm not doing that to be causing you to be afraid or to put your attention into fear. What I'm doing that is saying, wake up to what is trying to be expressed from the inside, not to what is being told from the outside. Wake up to meaningful relationships with each other and the world around you. Wake up to living life as fully present to life. Where are we tending toward? Are we tending toward fear and upset? Are we tending toward love and mutual support? I love this community, this thing we call Futh, because here in this room, loving and mutual support are normal. And when we see each other in the community, whenever I see any of you out there, Russ was and his wife were at Freddie's last night when I was walking through, and I see various people around town, and we just light up, right? Because we know love and mutual support is where our attention is. And when we do that, something opens up in us that undoes what we were focusing our attention on. I was in a German restaurant yesterday. There's one in Coos Bay called the Blue Heron. Strongly recommended. And I have been in that restaurant many times. I lived in Coos Bay for a little while. And I saw something I had not seen before while I was there. And that's a photograph of the Berlin Wall in November of 1989. My mother died 6 months after the Berlin Wall came down. She no longer had a reason to be on the planet. Yeah. Thank you, dear. The reason that she was on the planet was to defend us from the nasty people on the other side of that wall. That's how she saw her life. She had lived in fear, protecting us her whole life. And I looked at this photograph. It's poster size. And the wall has graffiti all over it, but what it has more than graffiti is thousands of people sitting on it singing. Singing. Sitting on the Berlin Wall. This thing that had been this fearful thing, this source of great pain and distress, was simply by an act of will coming from the inside, now a place of celebration and appreciation. We are not stuck with what they tell us is and has to be. But we cannot act as in reaction to what they are telling us we must attend to. We must tend toward that which is coming from within us to be an expression of love and mutual support. Are you willing to go there with me? Mm-hmm. That's what we're here for. That's all that matters. And that I'm looking forward to seeing more of. Thank you very much.